What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022 and the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021. Now, of course, as the name implies, the Moto G Stylus 2022 is the successor of the Moto G Stylus 2021 that came out last year around this time. So we're going to go over what all has changed, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of which one will be a better fit for you. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones, be sure to check out my full reviews of them as well. But with that being said, let's get started. So the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022 has a 6.8-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 396, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 84.6%. We got a hole punch up here for the front-facing camera right here in the middle, and this camera is 16 megapixels. Overall, the design does look really nice, and I like that we're getting a slightly taller form factor here than usual. This is going to make videos in landscape mode look a little bit nicer, and when you're reading stuff, you're going to be able to fit more on the screen without having to scroll as much. Now, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021 has a 6.8-inch display as well. This is also an IPS LCD, although the refresh rate for this phone is only 60 Hz versus the 90 Hz display we get with the Moto G Stylus 2022. Now, with the Moto G Stylus 2021, we're also getting a resolution of 1080p, looks just as nice and sharp. We're getting a PPI of 386, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 84.8%. So basically the same thing, although visibly, I would definitely say the bezels look a little bit thinner on the Moto G Stylus 2022. Overall, both of these phones have really good displays, nice resolutions, everything is going to be sharp and crisp on them. I would say they're about equal in pretty much every regard, except I do like the form factor of the Moto G Stylus 2022 a little bit better, because again, it's slightly taller than the Moto G Stylus 2021. And again, with the refresh rate, having a higher refresh rate means the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, which is going to make the phone feel a little bit more premium. And when you're consuming content, of course, where there's going to be a lot of motion on the screen, you're going to get a better experience overall. In addition to this, I do like the placement of the front-facing camera a little bit better on the Moto G Stylus 2022 because I personally think having it in the middle is a lot more clean and just looks nicer overall. And almost forgot to mention, the front-facing camera of the Moto G Stylus 2021 is also 16 megapixels, so pretty much the same as far as functionality goes. Now for storage, both of these phones are getting 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so no difference there, although 128 gigabytes of internal storage is definitely a good amount, especially in this day and age. So whether you're just an average user or a power user, having one of these phones with so much internal storage and microSD card expansion on top of that is never going to be a bad thing. Now, neither of these phones have wireless charging, but we do have fingerprint scanners on both of them right here on the power keys, same spot. One thing I do think is kind of interesting is that with the Moto G Stylus 5G, a phone that actually came out in between the release of the Moto G Stylus 2021 and the 2022, actually has the fingerprint scanner on the rear. So I don't know why Motorola keeps switching it back and forth, but with both of these phones, the fingerprint scanner is, as you can see, right here on the side, which is definitely not a bad spot for it. So starting with the Moto G Stylus 2022, we're going to give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive. Moving on to the Moto G Stylus 2022. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both of these fingerprint scanners are real fast and responsive. No issues here. And both of these phones have face unlock as well, so we get multiple options to get into these phones, which is definitely a nice thing to have. Now taking a look at the rear camera setup of the Moto G Stylus 2022, we got a triple camera here with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. With the Moto G Stylus 2021, we got a quad camera setup here with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now, in general, both of these phones have pretty much the same features. The only real difference here is that instead of having a separate macro camera, the macro camera is actually incorporated into the ultra-wide camera with the Moto G Stylus 2022. Now, this is really not going to make that much of a difference in functionality. It's more just an efficiency thing. And as far as the appearance goes, I do really like how the camera setup looks on the Moto G Stylus 2022. It looks a lot cleaner and just better quality overall. Versus the Moto G Stylus 2021 that doesn't look bad, it just doesn't look quite as clean. But in reality, the appearance really doesn't matter a whole lot. It's more going to be about the performance of these cameras, but I would still say that while both of these phones do take great pictures, the quality of the photos taken by the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022 is a little bit of an upgrade from the Moto G Stylus 2021. So if you want to take the best photos possible with all the features you can get, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 is going to be a great option. But again, both of these phones do take great pictures, and the Moto G Stylus 2021 really isn't very far behind at all. Now internally, the Moto G Stylus 2022 is getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G88 processor. The Moto G Stylus 2022 is getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 678 processor. So right away we're seeing the Moto G Stylus 2022 actually has 2GB of RAM more than the Moto G Stylus 2021. So in that regard, it's definitely an upgrade. And having more RAM overall is a nice thing. But I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on both of these phones. And the Moto G Stylus 2022 came back with a single core score of 368 and a multi-core score of 1304. And the Moto G Stylus 2021 came back with a single core score of 462 and a multi-core score of 1405. So there's definitely a little bit of a difference here. The Moto G Stylus 2021 is in fact faster, and I have run multiple Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on this phone, and they all come back at least a little higher than the Moto G Stylus 2022, so that really goes to show that despite some improvements made in the Moto G Stylus 2022 over the 2021 model, the processor is not one of these, and it's actually a little bit of a downgrade. So that is a little disappointing to see, because logically you would expect the newer phone to have more processing power, but unfortunately they did go a little backwards here. So if you want the phone out of the two that has the most processing power and is going to be the fastest, the Moto G Stylus 2021 is going to have an advantage. Now, is this a really big advantage? That's kind of subjective, but I would be inclined to say no, not really. They're both going to have the same ballpark of capabilities. Neither of these phones is going to be particularly great for high-end activities like gaming and video editing. You can play games on either of them, and you'll easily be able to do things like browsing the web and going on social media, and then streaming videos and stuff like that. But again, if you're doing those high-end activities like higher-end gaming or maybe video editing with large files or something like that, they're both probably not going to be the greatest devices for those activities. But with that being said, if you're going to be on your phone a lot, you're probably going to notice a little bit of a difference here. And in that case, the Moto G Stylus 2021 is going to have slightly better performance. Now, speaking of video editing, for video capture quality, the Moto G Stylus 2022 caps out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, whereas with the Moto G Stylus 2021, we can shoot up to 4K at 30 frames per second in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. So that is definitely something to keep in mind here. If you like shooting high quality videos, of course, the Moto G Stylus 2021 is going to have a slight advantage here. But if you're not really going to be making videos, maybe you're doing Snapchat or something like that, but really nothing more, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 is going to be fine. But again, that still is a little bit of a disappointment that we don't get that feature with the 2022. I don't know why they took away 4K video, especially since it's becoming more and more popular. Now, is it a huge deal? Probably not. Sure, you might not want to shoot 4K all the time, but having the option to is really nice. So it was nice to get that with the Moto G Stylus 2021, and it's really too bad that they took it away with the 2022. Now, battery is another area we see an actual improvement, with the Moto G Stylus 2022 having a 5000 mAh battery supporting 10 watt fast charging, and the Moto G Stylus 2021 having a 4000 mAh battery also supporting 10 watt fast charging. So that's quite an increase here. The Moto G Stylus 2022, of course, has a 25% larger battery than the Moto G Stylus 2021. So if battery life is important to you, definitely keep this in mind, because in reality, when you're actually using the phone, the difference between a 4000 mAh battery and a 5000 mAh battery is definitely going to be really noticeable, both in overall battery life per charge and longevity down the road. Now, neither of these phones have NFC, yet another disappointment with the Moto G Stylus 2022, because contactless mobile payment services which is what NFC is used for, are becoming more and more popular and widely used by more and more people. So I would think that in 2022, with pretty much every other phone in this price range getting NFC, Motorola would put it in the Moto G Stylus 2022, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. Now, maybe there's an international version that has it, I don't know, but this specific phone I got unlocked at Best Buy doesn't have it. So I'm really hoping that the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, or whatever they end up calling it, if they even release one at all, does have NFC. But again, this current phone, the Moto G Stylus 2022, doesn't. And the Moto G Stylus 2021, of course, doesn't either. So now that we've gone over some of the specs, let's take a closer look at these actual devices themselves. On the right hand side here, we got basically the same kind of setup here. Power key doubling as a fingerprint scanner, volume down, volume up. On the back here, we got the same thing, camera setup, flash, Motorola branding. The Moto G Stylus 2022 has a slightly metallic finish, whereas the Moto G Stylus 2021 has a glossy finish, and I personally like the metallic finish a little bit better. It looks overall higher quality and more premium. But then again, the Moto G Stylus 2021 doesn't look bad either. Although I would say between the two, the Moto G Stylus 2022 does look a little bit more modern as well. On the left side here, we got the slots for the SIM cards and the micro SD cards. On the top, both phones have the noise canceling microphones. And on the bottom, same kind of stuff, 3.5mm headphone jack, USB-C port, microphone, speaker, and of course the styluses. Now speaking of the styluses, here's another improvement we see with the Moto G Stylus 2022. This stylus is perfectly round, so it's a lot easier to take out and put back in than the Moto G Stylus 2021. So if we just take it out, put it in at whatever angle, obviously it's going to go in just fine. Whereas with the Moto G Stylus 2021, it's more of an oval, and if you put it in the wrong way, it's not going to go all the way in. So if we turn it around here, go like this. As you can see, it's not going to go in all the way. Now, is this really that big a deal? No, it's not really that hard to put a stylus in. But at the same time, I do think the design makes a lot more sense with the Moto G Stylus 2022. But in conclusion, which of these devices is better? Now, despite some areas that I do think are a little bit of a downgrade, the Moto G Stylus 2022, although it's by a disappointingly marginal amount, is definitely a better device overall than the Moto G Stylus 2021. For one thing, I do like the design quite a bit better. From the front-facing camera to just the overall style and design, it just looks a lot cleaner, and it really feels more high quality and premium to hold as well. I also like the display a little bit better. There are no real huge improvements here, but having a 90Hz display definitely makes it feel a little bit more premium versus the 60Hz display of the Moto G Stylus 2021. And then of course there's the form factor. Having a slightly taller form factor, in my opinion, is a lot better, makes the phone feel a lot more modern and just nicer overall. In addition to this, while close, I do think the camera setup with the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a bit of an improvement. I like how they combine the ultra-wide camera and the macro camera. While it doesn't really affect functionality a whole lot, it still is a really cool thing that they did here. And in addition to just that, I do think the Moto G Stylus 2022 does take slightly better photos as well. Now that's not to say the Moto G Stylus 2021 doesn't take good photos either, because it really does. But if I were to choose just based on the camera, I would say the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a little bit better. And then of course, another really obvious advantage here is the Moto G Stylus 2022 has a much larger battery. So if battery life is your top priority, or even one of your priorities at all, then this is definitely something to keep in mind. Now that being said, the Moto G Stylus 2021 does have two distinct advantages here, one being the processor. This phone does have a slightly more powerful processor, although I personally have come to believe that the difference is barely even enough to matter. It's more just a disappointment that the Moto G Stylus 2022 isn't more powerful, but when it comes down to it, they're both going to be able to do pretty much the same set of things. It's not like the Moto G Stylus 2021 is flagship level, and the Moto G Stylus 2022 is entry level. They're really in the same range, so in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. So definitely keep this in mind as well. But the other advantage the Moto G Stylus 2021 has is that it can shoot 4K videos, whereas the Moto G Stylus 2022 can. Another feature I wish they didn't take away, but unfortunately they did. But at the end of the day, I honestly think it's really going to come down to what kind of deals you can get. If both of these phones were the same price, I would definitely choose the Moto G Stylus 2022 over the Moto G Stylus 2021. I do think it has enough advantages to be worth it, but if you can get the Moto G Stylus 2021 for a much lower price, then I would say it might be a better choice just because the differences are so marginal. Now again, if you want to learn more about either of these phones, be sure to check out my full reviews and tips and tricks videos for them as well. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.